Hello and welcome to the Child Psych Podcast. I'm Tanya Johnson, registered psychologist, registered play therapist, co-founder of the Institute of Child Psychology, and probably most importantly, a mum. Today in studio with us, we have Brian St. Louis. Brian is a catalyst for change in the lives of young people, educators, and parents alike. With a mission rooted in radical empathy, Brian seeks to bridge the gap between misunderstanding and perspective, fostering a deeper understanding of compassion and care in today's youth. As a seasoned educator, Brian understands the pivotal role that adults play in shaping the lives of young individuals. He speaks at conferences, engages with parents, and collaborates with teachers, advocating for a holistic approach to education that extends way beyond academic success. Brian, welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That was a great intro as well. I appreciate that.
Well, your
I
your
was like,
work
wow.
your work is so incredibly important. At the Institute, we're so strongly based in seeing the whole child for who they are. And it
Mm,
sounds like that connects very deeply with your mission in the world.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm,
that's when it comes to, the I think you said it properly, the understanding. When
mhm.
we're able to understand that child, I do believe it makes a massive difference in how we're able to work with, care for, and ultimately uplift that child. So yeah,
Mhm,
absolutely.
mhm. Brian, I know that your passion in life is really speaking about the transformative power of educators. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, and just to add a little bit about that story, I never thought I was going to go into education. That was never a part of my cards. That was never a part of the desires of my life. I wasn't actually the greatest most studious student. Even in university, I did well, but it wasn't a passion of mine, or even the thought of it to be a passion of mine to be an educator in any way, shape, or form. The What happened for me was when I started working with youth, it it pretty much changed my whole paradigm.
Mm,
Sorry, give me one second.
no problem.
My son just came in.
Oh, don't deal with him and then come back to me. It's all
Give
good.
me
Take
yeah,
your
give me
time.
two
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
minutes. No
Yeah.
problem. Yuki, come here, come here. Come here. You have to stay upstairs with your brother, okay? You gotta stay upstairs. You gotta stay upstairs with your brother, okay? Can you do that? Or do you want to? My apologies. Sorry
Oh, don't
about
worry
that.
about it. I have two little girls, so I totally get
Yeah.
it. Um,
Uh,
should we rewind a little bit and I can just ask how you got into this journey, and then we can
sure, yeah.
start from there. Yeah. Brian, this journey is so incredibly important, and I'm curious to know how you went down this path. What led you to really being so passionate about the transformative power of educators?
Yeah, so in order for me to even get there, I have to first even talk about how I got into education in the first place because, for me, uh, I grew up with about four other siblings, and my brothers very intelligent, but studious. They did really well in school, pushed really well in high school, university. I was the youngest, and I was the one that didn't push as hard. Let's just say that within my education. And I saw even in university, I could have gone much harder, or I could have taken a little bit more steps in order for me to do better within my education. But I always had this issue of, what is this? I hope this is gonna do everything that it needs for me in my life, X, Y, and Z. But I always had these thoughts that would almost hold me back in the sense. It wasn't until I started working with kids and I saw how deeply important it is for learning, for reading, for learning how to learn in the first place. Uh, Allowing these youth to be in a position where they have a strong background in education, which ultimately tends to lead to a stronger success in their future. When I saw that, it basically gave me such a strong shift in how I viewed education and what I would want to do to make sure that the youth in society have everything that they need in a sense. Because a lot of youth, if we really want to impact youth, we have to impact where they are the most, and they're the most at home and they're the most at school. And in fact, we can even say they're even more at school than they are at home for the most part, at least awake. And so as I started getting to this whole journey of youth development, it gave me this deep understanding of how much I want to focus in on I want to focus in on youth education primarily. Sorry, my
It's
two
okay.
boys.
It's okay.
Did we get that? Did we get that one in there?
Yes, it's all there. It's
Okay.
beautiful.
Sorry, one second. Come here, come here. What's wrong? What's wrong? Yeah,
Don't worry about it. It's the power of editing.
that's true.
Um,
Is this video recorded, by the way, or no?
so we put clips, and if so, we'll do a clip. But if you're also like you don't want us to put it on our YouTube channel, we can also just keep the video off the
No,
YouTube
I
channel.
have no
Don't
problem
care.
with that. I have no problem with
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. So, all right. So in within that, Brian, what came up for you in terms of the power that a teacher holds?
So I'll say this: when I started working at a juvie, and during that time working at a juvenile detention facility, I had to actually work also in programming, and also sometimes there were these moments where teachers would come in and work with the juveniles in the morning. Sometimes if the juveniles didn't have the teacher that came in, we as staff and specialists would have to help out and also lead out the classes. That actually is what got me to start in within youth education. Just that small little time. And I realized how sometimes a small way in which we can connect with them helps them to care about the education that they have in the first place. And so mind you, I'm only 21, 22 at this time. I'm not old.
Mm,
I'm a very young man. I'm just getting out of university myself. And we're working with kids who have committed crimes, working with kids who are having a hard time in general, learning, and a lot of them, the reason why they hate learning so much is because they have a difficulty grasping the information, and they don't want to look as though they're not intelligent. They don't want to look as though they can't excel in something, and so a lot of times they choose to act out in certain ways when it comes to the classroom. But I remember just being able to sit down with them and seeing how we can try to make sure this makes sense. That made such a massive difference for that kid. Now, when I started working in the schools, it was the same thing. All right, a lot of times we saw how the just that extra effort that we were able to give with that child proved to give them an understanding that, or more so, the clarity that they needed in order for them to say, "Hey, you know what? I actually understand this material." And
mm,
so, when I look at educators, I, to me, and I know sometimes people don't like to hear this, but when I became a teacher, I understood a week into my job that I was not going to be just a teacher. I was going to be a mentor. I was going to be a supporter. I was going to be in a sense, a counselor, right? I'm not gonna actually be counseling with in a clinical sense, but I'm gonna be someone who they can listen to, who they can hear and listen to. There was so much to that role that I realized the teacher has so much power in how they can relate, connect, and deepen the experience for that child. I knew at that moment this is what it takes in order for us to truly educate a kid. And
Hmm.
one of the things that came to my mind, I think can't remember exactly who said this, but I heard this earlier on in my time as a teacher, and it says, "Kids who are loved and cared for at home, they come to learn. Kids who are not loved and have a hard time or have traumatic experiences, they come to connect." And I understood very, especially, the school that I worked with had a lot of at-risk youth as well. And so I I emphasized the connection piece. And through the emphasis of the connection piece, it actually allowed for the academics to increase as well. And so I really do believe that sometimes teachers don't understand how powerful their influence can really be. And and I see it right now as a speaker. I see it right now, as we do a lot of work within schools. I know a lot of teachers, and I speak to tons of them. They always talk about how they're getting frustrated. The the field is very difficult, and which it absolutely is. Teachers are leaving in droves completely. Yeah. And but in that, I always tell them, a lot of times you're not fighting, especially, when it comes to parents who are giving them a lot of pushback. I always tell them this: you're not fighting the parent, actually. You're fighting the parent's past experience.
Mm, beautiful.
You're fighting their life that they had when they were a child, and now they're projecting that on their child, and they're projecting that onto you. You never taught them, but they're giving the same thoughts that you are the same way that that teacher was 20, 30 years ago. And so that's what most teachers are fighting right now. They're not fighting parents, they're fighting the past.
Hmm.
And the only way to truly, and I believe this with 100% of my life, uh, in a sense, but the only way to truly combat this, I really do believe, is through this concept of radical empathy and how we are able to better understand one another. But it's not just empathy towards students, it's building a deepened understanding of one another from all levels to all levels. And so that
Hmm.
means students are learning empathy so that they can build that towards each other and staff. Teachers are learning how to be empathetic towards each other and the students and administration. And administration is learning how to be empathetic towards teachers and students. And that means also making tough decisions when kids act out or have issues. They don't just send them back into the classroom and allow the teacher to feel as though they're worthless, right? And this concept of empathy is actually action based. And a lot of people they sometimes hear it as a fluff word, but in fact, it's very assertive that we can
Mm.
make a difference in the person's life in order for them to ameliorate their situation and uplift their situation around them. And so I really do believe it's tough. I'm not out here telling teachers, oh, just pick yourself up for your bootstraps. I don't believe in that.
Connect,
A
connect.
lot, right,
Yeah.
right. Like we're not doing that. That's not what I'm saying here at all. What I am saying though is the deeper we we are able to make that impact in our kid, who knows if that's the perception that changes not only just the student, but also changes the parent's perspective on education in general too. But it
Mm-hmm.
takes every single one of us to make that difference. And I think it's one that's going to take a lot of time. It's not an easy chance. It's not an easy choice. But I missed one, to be honest. Parents learning empathy for our educators,
Hmm.
because most parents have never taught in the classroom. They don't know what it feels like to have to teach 30 kids. They have a hard time teaching or raising two. I mean,
Totally
you
me.
saw me. Like my boys, they out here, they're trying to make I have to coach them through, hey guys, listen, it takes a lot to parent. And
Mhm.
now imagine you're now sitting in front of 30 kids.
I can't. Yeah, it's an incredible skill. It really is. Brian, when we talk about radical empathy, from what you just said to me, it sounds like a definition of radical empathy would be empathy that kind of permeates on every level in all different directions.
Yeah.
How would you define radical empathy?
I give it a simple three-step method. See, care, act.
Mm,
I try to make it as simple as possible. I don't like to make things as too extravagant where individuals can't understand it.
mhm,
But it's simple enough for you to understand and deep enough for you to work for the rest of your life.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm. I love
see,
it.
care, act.
Mhm,
Empathy is the ability for us to understand and to imagine, right? And so a lot of times, we're able to, and I love the breakdown. Like for instance, Brene Brown breaks down the differences between sympathy and empathy, right? Sympathy, a lot of times we're just, oh, hey, man, it's more so of a pity. It's more
mhm,
in that sense, and there's nothing done, right?
mhm,
But empathy, your presence makes a massive difference in that person's life. It helps us to deepen that understanding within that person. It also allows them to imagine what it could feel like to be in this person's shoes in the situation. Radical empathy just goes the extra mile. It basically says, what action step am I going to take that is going to be fruitful to help make a difference in this person's life right now? Because sometimes empathy is great, but sometimes we do also need to make a step into a direction to make an actionable difference in the person's life. And so that's to me is the is one of the stronger holds that radical empathy has. It
mm,
allows us to move forward and to say, what can I do? So now once you stopped imagining and now you're back in your shoes, it's not just me saying, "Oh man, this is tough. I'm here for you." But now it's okay. I'm now in my position in my mind. I'm not imagining anymore in this person's shoes. What can I do right now to make a difference? What can I do to make sure that this person is not going to stay in the same predicament that they're in? And so it's not just me going into the pit with that person, but now I've thrown a rope and I'm pulling them out in a
mm,
sense. So that's the step between radical empathy and empathy. It's just an action step. It's a very deliberate, intentional step that we make, and it's one that many of us don't make.
mhm,
It's one that is very difficult. It's one that takes a lot of listening because we can't act without understanding what that person truly needs. Right. And so there's so many different aspects to this with radical empathy, but that's why I say it's a simple three-step method that will take a lifetime for us to really understand and how we can uh, implement it more so.
mm,
But that's why I believe that empathy is a skill. This is not just something that some of us have. Some people say, "Oh, you're an empath." You just connect. You love to just connect with people in that sense. Yeah, but I don't know if I was always that way. I don't think I was, just to be
mhm,
honest. And I believe that a lot of us also we yes, we may have some preconceived notion or have some naturalistic ways that we are in our personalities and our characteristics, but there are skills that we can develop, and I do believe that empathy is absolutely a skill that is developed that ultimately we can build up on how we think of others, and that changes the way that we also react or act on their behalf as well.
mm. And I think it pushes us out of punitive practices with kids. So I've got two little bio kids now, but
Yes.
prior to being their mum, I was a foster mom for 4.5 years to a
Mm,
sibling group of four. And one of the little boys, he really, really, really struggled. And we must have gone through 6 schools in 2 years.
I love, wow.
And yeah, and a deep part of me just really wanted somebody to care enough to think about what his story was. The fact that he was coming to school each
Mm,
day, even though, at some point the classroom was getting destroyed. But I just felt like nobody ever stopped to say, what is his story? And what does
mm.
he need? What does he need right now?
Yeah, I want to touch on that for a second because something came to my mind right before I came to this podcast. It is hard to love somebody who you don't choose to understand.
Mhm,
And a lot of people don't communicate and don't sit down and just have simple conversations that allows us to understand who this person is, why they are the way that they are, and that gives us this care for this person. Because once we communicate with people, that typically brings us to this place where, we want to learn more, we want to connect more. And I, I like hearing you just say that, I felt really deep with that because some just a simple conversation can make such a massive difference in so many people's life. I remember when I was working at a school, and I'll say this, some people think that this is such extra work that has to be done. It's not. It's just intentional work. When I was working at my school, one of the things that I did with every single one of my students, I sat down with them for about 5 to 10 minutes in the beginning of the school year, and all I did was ask about some of their dreams, some of their goals, what are some of the things that they want to do with their lives, some things that they want to accomplish. I, I'm telling you right now, in my head, I did not think this was a massive deal.
mm,
But so many of them, I remember there was another teacher that came by. I know there's no hit to the teacher, but like another teacher came by and tried to talk to that student, and they were like, "Oh no, I don't listen to you. I'm only gonna listen to St. Louis because he understands me. He knows me."
mm,
And in my head, I'm like, I all I did was have maybe a 10-minute conversation. I didn't go that deep, but those small intentional efforts, those kids see, and they say to themselves, "Oh, this person actually cares about my story."
totally.
And that alone can make such, yeah, when you said that, that just really, that it hit a string because I think, especially as people who, somebody said this to me yesterday, actually. They said, we don't have the, how did he break it down? He said, we don't have the luxury to say it's not our job anymore. We don't have the luxury to say, it's not my responsibility. Any adult that sees a child is, I'm not saying, all of us are going to be their hero, but that also doesn't mean any of us have to be their villain,
Mhm,
and it's important for us to realize that we can make a difference in these kids' lives, and we want to see their growth because the way that a lot of them are moving and are going in society right now, they need tons more mentors and people who are actually going to listen to make a difference in their lives.
100%, 100%. We know that attachment or connection is built up through exactly what you're saying, Brian, through frequent, sustained interactions. So
Yeah,
it's not that we need a 50-minute therapy session. It's got more to do, and I often say it as our teachers that change the world. It's got more to do with every day I see this kid and I look in their eyes and say, like, hey, I'm so glad you're here today. Or where were you yesterday? I missed you.
that's right.
I see you. I see you deeply. And, part of the Institute's mandate was that as a therapist, if I'm lucky, I get 2 hours a month with a kid. So they come every other week.
Mm,
I'm not going to change a child's world. I can be a guide, but I'm not necessarily going
mhm.
to change a child's world. It's our people who see kids every single day that have the biggest impact.
I agree. I
Mhm,
agree. There's nothing more to that. I don't even need to add to that
mhm,
because when when you have the opportunity to be in somebody's life, you are either going to be a positive influence or a detriment to that person. And like you said, I've been in schools where, you know, sometimes there are teachers who don't really know even if they didn't have the piece of paper, they wouldn't know the kid's last name. And then I know teachers who they know everything about all the students, and they're deliberate, they're intentional. And those kids feel the difference. And I think we've heard this being said before. As a kid will. a kid will start caring once they learn how much you care.
Yeah.
And as much as like I've had people who I remember somebody came to me and said, "Oh, Brian, you try to make it seem like it's so easy. Like, oh, if you just build a relationship with them, that's what's gonna really, excuse me, if you just build a relationship with them, that's what's gonna be the thing that makes the difference." And but what else can I do? What are the other steps? And I always tell them, go online. You can go online all you want and find all the classroom management tips that you want. You can do everything there's so much information out there. That we live in a time right now where we're not lacking information.
Hmm.
But we're lacking connection. We're lacking relationship. And that and I've said it really simply, your relationship is actually your prevention. If you want to see a lot better classrooms, build a relationship with those kids. Let those kids know that you actually care about them deeper than just them having to learn the curriculum. And
Hmm.
then they'll say, oh, and you'll see how much they care about you as well. And to me, I'm not saying it's easy, because some people it's also difficult to build relationships as well. And I have to understand, like my wife told me that one time, she said, Brian, you do this. Like that's your life, right? You've ever since you were a kid, you built relationships with people. And so I have to also understand that again, there are certain things that I'm already privy to that has helped me to do this in this way. And there are other areas that I lack, right? But at the end of the day, I really do believe that the deeper we understand how strong the power of those relationships are, it will make a massive difference in our classrooms.
Hmm. I agree. And I think when our children feel safe, that stress response, that hypervigilance goes down, and then learning is way more easier.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Hmm.
Can you hear? Okay.
Not at
All
all.
right.
Yeah. Ryan, when we look at practical application strategies, I know you're saying this comes down to relationship. I've heard one that I love: see, care, act, which is huge.
Mhm.
For teachers out there who are not even sure where to start, they're overwhelmed, they've got 30 kids in their class, what are some ideas for them? What are some thoughts?
2 by 10. It's a concept that somebody taught me not too long ago. And I think it's just a very simple method. 2 minutes, 10 times in a month.
Mm.
If you just, hey, hey, Chris, how's it going? I'm good. How was that baseball game? Oh, we actually did pretty well. Blah, 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 blah. Cool, cool, cool. Hey, Sarah, how was your recital? You know, um, oh, Sarah, remember that thing that you did last weekend, and and there was that connection piece, or uh, I ended up doing that too. I was doing a dance too. Oh, okay. Oh, that's what. Hey, I don't know. Hey, Brian, let's go, Brian. Uh, Man, I know you love anime. Did you see that new Attack on Titan? What? You watch Attack on Titan? Yeah, I watch Attack. It's 2 by 10, really
Mm.
simple, just 2 minutes where you try about ten students
Yeah.
throughout, let's say throughout the week, where you're having deliberate, intentional conversations with them, and you'll start realizing that you don't have to do five, you don't have to do 10-minute conversation, you don't have to do sit downs with them. But again, it's deliberate conversations that don't have anything to do with the classroom.
Mm.
They have to do with that kid's life. They have to do with your life
Mhm.
because is it Dr. Bruce, I believe his name is Dr. Bruce Brown.
Dr. Bruce
This is
Perry?
Dr. Bruce Perry. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's the second time I did a podcast and I forgot his name.
Yeah.
Dr. Bruce Perry, he talks about the concept of regulation and then reasoning, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, yeah, regulation and reasoning is it. But he's like, no, you guys forget the middle piece, relation. Relating is so key to that whole fundamental connection with that child. When you're trying to regulate them, when you can't regulate someone unless you can't do it properly until you can relate to them in some way, shape, or form. And the greatest relation that we have to people is the fact that we're people.
Yeah.
Yeah. like forget about like my experiences. My experience is gonna look completely different than you.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna have the same life that every child had. I don't know what it feels like to not have a father in my life. I don't know what it feels like to not have a mother in my life. I don't know what it feels like to live in certain conditions, rich or poor, right? I grew up middle class. I still live middle class, but there's so many ways for us to be able to relate to kids. We just gotta look for something. And if you could just find one thing, I promise that one kid that and I'll say this, I don't want to be too rude or anything of that nature, but some of us just don't like these kids.
Yeah.
And it shows in how we choose to teach them. And
Hmm.
the kid feels the energy right away. They feel the energy. You can't teach someone who you don't like.
Hmm.
And that kid and that person is not willing to listen to you. They won't listen to what you have to say.
Yeah.
It's like for instance, if I wanted a coach and that coach was constantly berating me, if I'm building like for instance my speaking business and I had a because I believe that everyone should have a coach, somebody who's better than you. When I say better, like somebody who knows more that can help you. But if I had a coach who was constantly berating me and attacking me, oh, you're not doing it, I wouldn't pay him anymore. I would go to someone else. And so I have to ask myself, like one of the things that I always ask myself is if those kids were forced to pay, would they actually want to pay to be around me?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, like, these are questions we have to ask ourselves. But ultimately, at the end of the day, those simple conversations, intentional conversations, make a massive difference in how we're able to connect with our kids. Again, these are not conversations that have to do with school. They are just about that child or a way for you to relate with your life. And again, that kid that you don't like in that classroom will cause the biggest problems. I still promise you, there is something that you can relate to with that child,
Hmm.
something,
Yeah.
and you just got to find it.
Yeah.
You got to care
100%.
enough to find it.
And I think too, Brian, when we don't care enough or when we feel triggered by a child, it's often an indicator that we have some of our own work to do.
Yeah,
It's something that,
yeah,
yeah,
that's real.
yeah. I have one last burning question for you because I know
Sure, no
parents who are
problem.
listening in. Within our kids, how do we develop empathy? Like you said, it's actually a taught skill. So I know that some people are just born with a different temperament, but it really is a skill that we hone over time. How do we start this with our children?
Are you asking how do we teach our children to be empathetic?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, the best way to teach a child empathy is for you to model empathy.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I don't have any better answer than that.
I
When
love
I when I
it.
look at when I look at leadership, you look into the workplace, you look at any organization that you're in, you look at any school that you're in. It's always at the top. As much as we don't love it, but the top expresses what the culture is going to be, and ultimately, the leader shows what things are going to look like within their organization, within their school, within their community, and within their. You are the leader of your home. If you want your child to be more empathetic, you have to show that empathy. You have to model that empathy. You have to show what that looks like. I don't want my child screaming. I don't like when my children yell. And guess what? I give my children permission. They're only 4. He's 4. The other one is 2. I give my children permission to tell me, Daddy, you yelled. You shouldn't do that. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Mhm.
I'll tell them, I'll say right away, I'll say, Daddy yelled because of this. And I don't yell a lot. But when I do, they know they can speak into that because
Mhm.
that's not something we want in our home. Because I've
Mhm.
talked about it so many times. And so to the point where when I did it that one time 2 weeks ago, he's like, Daddy, but you say we're not supposed to yell. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Mhm.
I'm like, you're right. Daddy was upset at you. I was like, but I didn't need to yell in order for me to get my point across.
Mm.
And then I sit down and I talk to them and I say, hey, this is what was going on. This is why I decided to do that. And I still shouldn't have, but this is what we need to do from here on.
Mhm.
So modeling is going to be your greatest level of empathy. And so that means you have to learn what it looks like to be empathetic. It means, sitting down, being able to actively listen to your children or listen to people without interrupting, without judgment. It means building that level of understanding. One of the things with empathy is I don't need to go through your situation in order for me to try to feel what you go through. And I say that because a lot of individuals sometimes they see people in the world and they judge. And I'll be the first person to tell you I was a massive judger growing up. Uh, and I, uh, I have to give kudos to my girlfriend or wife and my wife girlfriend at the time, my wife now, who called me out on a lot of that. And there were times where I would judge people. I was just like, and you sit back and you actually listen and communicate with them. You're like, wow, like why did I say that? Why did I think that? So basically, a lot of times we look at people's situations and we judge them so terribly without having not an inkling of what's going on in their lives. And then when it's our time, we want all the empathy in the world. We want all the understanding in the world. Then if we want that, we have to be first willing to give it in the first place. And so I always tell people, take the time to learn and develop the skills of empathy, because you don't just need to receive it, you need to be able to give it
Mm.
as well. So, and the first person you need to be able to give it to is going to be the person who especially the people in your home. So the person you choose to marry, and then the children you produce after that, or the children that you end up adopting after that, or the children you
Mhm.
choose to foster after that, right? Anyone that comes into your home, if we could build that empathy then, and what that means is I look at my children and I say, what does it feel like to try to be a 4-year-old and trying to understand the world around me? Uh, you're listening to a grown man who has 33 years of experience, and I want you to understand all of that no,
Mm.
like how do I give a bite-sized understanding of life in your mind and the way that you're able to comprehend it without it being, as you said, punitive, without it being punishment based, and they can really learn,
Mhm.
how to live through that. So yeah,
Mhm.
I would say modeling leadership is going to be your best way to do that at
Huge.
home.
Yeah, and Brian, I think that's how we change the world.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Brian, for everybody listening in who wants to find out more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, you can find me at bslspeaks.com. If you'd ever want me to come in and do any speaking engagements, if you ever want me to come in and do workshops and for leadership within your organization, within your schools, I'm always willing to make that happen as well. I'm also on Instagram. That's BSL_speaks. And YouTube as well. I need to get my YouTube up more. But I'm also doing a podcast, it's BSO Speaks Podcast, and that it just focuses primarily on bringing in individuals and guests, professionals who work with youth, who have done a lot of work with leadership more so. And so trying to change the world and elevating humanity one leader at a time. So you can find me there as well.
Beautiful. And we'll put all of those links in the show notes too.
Awesome.
Brian, thank you so much for your time. This has been beautiful.
I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, and I really love what you're doing here. So thank you so much for allowing me on your platform.
Thank you.